financial advisors are not willing to educate themselves. The reason we're using life insurance is not because I want to just sell a bunch of whole life. I do want to sell a whole bunch of whole life to you so that you have liquidity, control, guarantees, and uninterrupted compound interest to use for the infinite banking concept. A financial advisor, they're not going to have the option for those things, all with those benefits. But when we look at liquidity, control, guarantees, uninterrupted compound interest, is it hitting all four of them? It can't just hit one. It must hit all four of those things, because if it doesn't, it cannot compare to what we're doing over here. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, first and foremost, if you guys are needing books for Christmas, then go ahead and grab those so that you get them at a discount and give them away as Christmas presents. All right, let's get into it. So today we are going to talk about the noise. And it's very interesting how financial advisors are not willing to educate themselves. And it has happened to me a couple of times now in the last couple of weeks, and it doesn't happen often. So I haven't talked about it for a while, but let's talk about it. So people have met with me and then they go to their financial advisor and they ask their financial advisor for advice on something that they have no clue about. So that alone to me is always a little bit odd. I get that we trust that person. I 100% understand. We trust the person that we know in our community that we've been working with for a long time. But we're also trusting somebody that has not read Nelson's book. They don't know anything about life insurance. They probably don't know anything about whole life insurance. They have not educated themselves on the matter of infinite banking or whole life. But we are letting them make decisions for us. If that's what you want to do, fine and dandy. But I want to address this matter because when people say, hey, Mary Jo, I don't want to do business with you, that's fine with me. I don't care. I don't pressure you. I don't come back to you and say, yeah, but your financial advisor is wrong. Nope, not going to do that because I'm not going to drag you in. I'm not going to convince you to buy whole life insurance. I'm not going to convince you about the infinite banking concept. If we can't do our own due diligence, then it's probably not for you. However, I think that this is a topic that needs to be addressed because we need to look at what the differences are. And so when we go into a financial advisor's office, number one, they are going to really look at, hey, how much do we need at retirement, at 65, or what are our rates of return? Neither one of those things are going to be important to me, right? What we need today is what the infinite banking concept is talking about. What do we need to finance today in our life? Can we create something can we use a tool that allows us to do that today? And so some financial advisors are saying, oh yeah, I can put your money into possibly a brokerage account or something like that you can borrow from. It is not the same thing. We are not talking about the same thing. I had a client a while back who his advisor actually said, I can't do what Mary Jo is doing with those interest rates. And so that advisor, kudos to them, they knew they couldn't match the four things I'm going to go over, but they still didn't understand how whole life worked. And so they said, yeah, I've never seen a dividend paid on these policies. How can you never see a dividend paid when dividends have been paid for hundreds of years? So how can you say you haven't seen that? Because you're not familiar with the product. And so when we are going and listening to all the noise out there, it's very easy to succumb to the noise when we are not educated and we are not looking at the big picture of what we want to do. So when I sit down with people, I want to know, what do we want to do today? Do we want to start a business? Do we want to add on to the business? Do we want rental properties? Do we want to start a farm? What do we want to do in our life today? I met with somebody today. His whole goal is to send the kids to college and pay cash for that. And he's going to pay cash for that because that's what his dad did. That's not going to be ideal because we have lost opportunity cost. And he has a ton of money in the market. And so I'm also saying, hey, you have been an amazing saver. You're only 50. If you continue to save like you are, we're going to have issues at 72 for required minimum distribution. If you die with a 401k or an IRA, the kids may have issues because they're going to have to pay tax. In 2025, there is a new rule. If you inherit an IRA, you have to take required minimum distributions every single year. Currently, it states if you inherit it, you just have to take it in 10 years. It doesn't matter which year or which years in 10 years, but just 10 years. Now they're going to require it every year because heaven forbid they not get their tax money, right? And so financial advisors aren't looking at that whole big thing, right? They're not looking at what we need today. They're only looking at the future. But when we look at what can they put money in that allows them to do the same thing, there isn't anything. And this is not to be compared to an investment. But if we have to compare it for a couple of things, it's not rate of return. I will not talk about rates of return because it's null and void. The life insurance policy gives you liquidity. So you have access to money whenever you want. You're going to have access to a brokerage account, right? Not a big deal. They're going to give you some things that have access, but those things do not have guarantees because they are going to be tied to the market. Unless they're in a bond portfolio, there's not going to be some sort of a guarantee on that product. We're going to have the ups and the downs of the market. So with whole life, we've got guarantees and we have control of that money. So we know that we can pay it back whenever we want. Is it the same for whatever the investment is that we are using for the same kind of tool? Do I have control to pay back whenever I want? Do I have control to pay more? What is the interest rate? This is the one thing that other advisor who said we can't do what Mary Jo does, their interest rate was like 9%. If they borrowed against whatever this investment was that they were putting money into. Here we have an interest rate of 4 to 6, 5.8 at the highest. So typically interest rates are about 5. So if you're going to use it, what is the cost to use it? And then do we have uninterrupted compound interest? Number 4. So we have number 1, liquidity, number 2, guarantees, number 3 is control, and then uninterrupted compound interest. If there was another tool that would offer all of those things, why wouldn't I say, hey, you know what? That is a much better idea than what I've got going here. When we have money in some sort of an investment, we don't have uninterrupted compound interest. If we do, what is the interest rate to borrow from whoever's lending it at that point, right? Is it 9%? But the reason we're using life insurance is not because I want to just sell a bunch of whole life. I do want to sell a whole bunch of whole life to you so that you have liquidity, control, guarantees, and uninterrupted compound interest to use for the infinite banking concept. If you want to implement the concept today, which is let me use my money today so I can buy farm ground or I can build a business or I can start a business, are you going to have uninterrupted compound interest in this other tool? So those things that an investment broker, a financial advisor, they're not going to have the option for those things, all with those benefits, right? You might have liquidity, but you don't have guarantees. Maybe it's a CD with uninterrupted compound interest, but then you have the bank that you have to deal with, right? You don't have control because now the bank has control of payback terms. And so if we look at the package, we have to understand that when we're going and asking advice from somebody outside of the infinite banking world. And if that person outside of the infinite banking world does not want to read Nelson's book or educate themselves, then I just ask, why are you talking to them? Why do you believe somebody that's uneducated, right? That's like saying, hey, I work a W-2 job, but I want you to tell me how to run a business. You wouldn't go to that person for business advice, right? So why are you going to somebody that is outside of this field of infinite banking and getting advice from them? And having questions from them is a whole different ballgame. I love it when people say, hey, I talked to my financial advisor. These are the questions that they came back with. Great. At least we can have a dialogue. But when you go there and you automatically accept everything they say as gospel, then you're not doing your due diligence. You came over here and then you went there to ask them for their advice. Why not do yourself a favor and come back and continue the conversation? I understand the trust piece of it, but are they looking at what you want to do today with that money while you're alive before retirement? Or are they only looking at how do we get you to X point? And we have interrupted compound interest. We don't have control. We don't have guarantees. Maybe we have liquidity. Liquidity is one piece of the four. We need to look at that as a whole. So if you are talking to people outside of the infinite banking concept and they have all this noise and they just keep repeating the noise, but when we look at liquidity, control, guarantees, uninterrupted compound interest, is it hitting all four of them? It can't just hit one. It must hit all four of those things. Because if it doesn't, it cannot compare to what we're doing over here. And then what is the big picture? So that's what I got to say today. I love when people do their due diligence. I absolutely love it. But it is better when you do your due diligence all the way around and you don't stop when you're halfway around that circle. But again, when people say that to me, I'm like, okay, that's great. Let me know if I can help with anything else because I don't care. It's your money. You do what you want with your money. You clearly don't understand what we're trying to do if we stop halfway through that investigation period. And if you're not fully understanding what infinite banking is trying to teach, and we're not understanding the problem and the solution to the problem, then you're not ready. And that's okay. That's okay. At some point in the future, maybe you will be. I don't know. It's just not for everybody, right? All right, you guys, you let me know if you have comments on this or if you say, hey, Mary Jo, this is something that's in the market that's the same. I'd love to know. I would absolutely love to know if it hits all four of those requirements. Because, hey, I'm always open to learn too. All right, you guys, you know where I'm at. Mary Jo at withoutthebank.com. Go to withoutthebank.com and grab your books for the Christmas sale. Give them to the family. All right, you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next podcast.